What makes you feel rich? Is it the money in your account? The peace of mind of not having to worry about next month? Owning your home, your car, that planned vacation? Does wealth have a defined face for you? Or is it still a distant promise, something you chase without ever truly reaching? There's an idea of wealth you carry without questioning it. And maybe it's shaping more decisions than you realize. For most people, wealth is tied to money because it represents comfort, stability, and security. It's having enough to live without fear, without struggle, without depending on anyone. It's being able to choose, being able to rest, not waking up every day with that tightness in your chest caused by bills, deadlines, and commitments that can't fail. In this sense, wealth functions as protection, solid ground in a world that punishes those who stumble. Wealth also means having options, being able to say no without feeling like you're throwing yourself into the abyss, changing direction without putting everything at risk, having room to make mistakes and space to breathe when things get tight, not being trapped in a single path, a single source, a single choice, having alternatives, and alternatives are often confused with freedom. In practice, this translates into simple and concrete things. The house you own that brings stability, the car that avoids exhausting commutes, an emergency fund, the ability to buy what's necessary without calculating every penny, having access to healthcare, education, leisure, being able to travel, rest, enjoy your time, having quality of life, having dignity. This definition doesn't come out of nowhere, nor from the wrong place. It's born from experience, from hardship, from the memory of not having enough. Those who've struggled understand the value of comfort. Those who've lived in instability know the weight of security. There's nothing superficial about wanting a life where survival isn't a daily battle. Wanting stability isn't weakness. In this sense, wealth is legitimate, human, and understandable. Experiences of scarcity teach early the value of comfort. Growing up in an environment where money was a constant source of worry changes how you view security. Living without knowing how to pay the next bill leaves marks. Having to choose between one thing and another because you couldn't have both shapes priorities. In this context, the pursuit of wealth isn't born from vanity. It's born from the need for protection. It's emotional survival. It's the desire to never feel that squeeze again and to build a place where you can finally relax. That's why the desire for comfort isn't the problem. Wanting to live well isn't greed. Seeking security isn't weakness. Comfort can make life easier, reduce suffering, and create space to care for those you love, have time, and breathe more peacefully. There's no virtue in going through unnecessary difficulties, nor honor in refusing what can make life lighter. Material possessions aren't enemies, they're tools. They can serve, support, and protect. Comfort, in itself, doesn't corrupt anyone. The tension appears when desire changes roles, when what was once a choice starts to command, when you're no longer seeking because you want to, but because you feel you can't stop. Desire can move you, but when it turns into constant hunger, it stops liberating and starts trapping, exactly the opposite of what it promised. Having money doesn't make you superficial. Having possessions doesn't make you empty. Seeking comfort doesn't make you weak. What imprisons isn't the object of desire, but the relationship you create with it, the meaning you attribute to it, the fear that arises when peace starts depending on it, when identity gets tied to what you possess, and when, without it, you no longer know who you are. The problem isn't in desire itself. This isn't new. Arthur Schopenhauer already said that desire is the engine of life, but also the source of human suffering. While we desire, we feel lack. When we achieve, the relief is brief. Soon, a new object emerges, a new goal, a new need. Desire never rests. It just changes form. At first, desire is healthy. It moves you, pulls you from inertia, gives direction. But, as Schopenhauer observed, there's a silent risk. When it's not understood, it stops being impulse and becomes prison. At some point, almost always without you noticing, desire stops being choice and transforms into urgency. It stops being want and becomes need. You don't want anymore, you need. And that difference changes everything. Urgency starts commanding. It doesn't suggest, it pushes. It insists you're late, that you're falling behind, that everyone's already gone further. Each achievement loses its value as an arrival and immediately becomes the starting point for the next race. There's no pause, there's no celebration. Because for urgency, stopping feels like failing. When this happens, life accelerates. A permanent sensation of insufficiency emerges. Comparison stops being occasional and becomes habit. You see people achieving, buying, displaying results, and something tightens inside. It's not simple envy. It's fear. Fear of falling behind. Fear of not making it. Fear of wasting time. Schopenhauer called this a cycle with no exit. While we desire, we suffer from lack. When we achieve, we suffer from boredom and the next need. Satisfaction never lasts. The object changes, but the emptiness remains. And the less awareness there is of this cycle, the more you run believing the next step will finally solve it. Social media intensifies all of this. You compare your raw reality with edited versions of others' lives. You see only the final result, never the process. Only the mountaintop, never the climb. This unequal comparison feeds anxiety and reinforces the feeling that nothing is enough. From there, you don't just want to achieve, you want to accelerate, you want to guarantee, you want to be certain you're secure. But certainty never arrives. The more you have, the more visible what's still missing becomes. The finish line shifts. Each achievement becomes an obligation. Rest disappears. Satisfaction starts to seem dangerous, as if pausing for an instant means falling behind while the world keeps running. At some point, you realize you're never satisfied. Not out of greed, but because urgency doesn't allow pause. It convinces you that stopping is losing, that relaxing is risky, that being satisfied is naive. Urgency keeps you in constant motion, but doesn't lead anywhere. It occupies time, but doesn't fulfill. You work more, produce more, seek more, and still don't feel better. Because what you're looking for isn't on the outside. It's something left behind along the way. Peace traded for rush. Presence sacrificed for anxiety. The ability to be where you are without the constant feeling you should be somewhere else. And that, no external achievement returns. The race starts almost imperceptibly. At first you accelerate because you want something. Then you accelerate because you can't stop anymore. The pace stops being choice and becomes default. You start living by producing, proving, justifying your existence through what you achieve. And this demands a silent price, a price that only appears when it's already too high. The exhaustion that emerges doesn't just come from the body, it's born in the mind that doesn't rest. Even while sleeping, you don't disconnect. Your head keeps processing, anticipating, trying to guarantee the next step. The day ends, but the tension remains. You're physically present, but distant inside. Slowing down starts to seem dangerous. Fear arises that any pause will make everything collapse. As if life were a treadmill that allows no rest, as if stopping meant going backward. Meanwhile, important things are lost without fanfare. Conversations become shallow. Moments pass without being lived. You're with people, but you're not whole. You respond on autopilot, listen without hearing, smile without feeling. Your mind always stays one step ahead, stuck on the next goal, the next proof that you're doing well. The where isn't just physical. It's mental, emotional, existential. You do a lot, but live little. You achieve, but don't feel. Life happens while you try to guarantee a future that never arrives, and the present slips away unnoticed. When you look back, you notice gaps. Days blend together, weeks repeat. You were so focused on arriving that you forgot to be, so concentrated on the goal that you lost the path. And even having advanced, something doesn't seem worth it, because you weren't present, you were running. Gradually, each moment becomes just a means to another end. You're no longer where you are. You're always anticipating, planning, protecting yourself from something that hasn't happened yet. And in this constant search for security, you end up losing exactly what should be protected: the experience of living. The small things lose value: coffee without rush, a calm conversation, a walk with no destination start to seem like a waste of time. Everything that doesn't generate immediate results sounds useless. You forget that living isn't just advancing. It's also feeling, noticing, existing without needing to justify each moment. And most importantly, this isn't your fault. It's not lack of strength, nor a character flaw. It's the effect of a system that teaches from early on that it's never enough, that turns rest into guilt and satisfaction into threat. You didn't fall into this from weakness, but from being human. It's within this scenario that attachment begins to form. From early on, you learn you need to be productive, that you need to grow, evolve, advance, that standing still is moving backward, that resting is laziness, that being satisfied is mediocrity. This logic installs itself gradually, almost without you noticing, until one day it becomes a ruler, an internal ruler by which you measure yourself every day. And almost always, the result is the same: insufficiency. Attachment isn't liking something, it's needing it. It's when having stops being choice and becomes dependency. You can appreciate comfort without being hostage to it. You can value security without enslaving yourself to it. But when attachment enters, freedom exits. Choice gives way to fear: fear of losing, fear of not having, fear of not being. Gradually, attachment distorts identity. You start believing you are what you possess, that your value is in achievements, position, salary, house, car. And when your identity rests on this, life starts being lived in a state of alert. Any instability becomes threat. Any risk becomes panic. The fear of losing stops being just material. It becomes the fear of ceasing to exist as you defined yourself. At this point, possession becomes weight. You achieve something and, along with the achievement, comes the obligation to maintain, protect, sustain. What seemed like security starts generating constant anxiety. Not because something's wrong, but because now there's much to lose. Attachment doesn't offer real security. It traps you in the illusion of it. From there, freedom diminishes. Taking risks starts to seem dangerous. Changing sounds irresponsible. Starting over seems impossible. What should open paths starts closing them. What promised peace starts producing tension. Because dependency and freedom don't coexist. You don't fear losing what you don't need. Fear concentrates on what defines you, what sustains your identity, what gives you place in the world. When all of this is tied to what you have, any threat becomes existential. The dread emerges of being nobody if everything disappears, of being worth nothing without external proof of your own value. This fear paralyzes. It doesn't just prevent mistakes, it prevents choice. You start opting for what seems safe, not what makes sense. You accept situations that wear you down to not lose stability. You remain in jobs that exhaust, in relationships that drain, in routines that aren't yours. Because leaving seems scarier than staying. Attachment also sustains appearances, expectations, status. The constant effort arises to maintain the image, to not disappoint, to not seem like you're regressing. You hold on, maintain, fake control even when it no longer exists. And this demands a high price: energy, time, presence. Life becomes dedicated to maintenance, not to living. Gradually, decisions stop being born from what you want or what's good for you. They start being guided by fear of shaking the structure, of losing position, of breaking the narrative. And in this process, something is lost. You stop being you. You transform into an adjusted, edited, acceptable version, a version that fits expectations but doesn't live fully. Deep down, the weight isn't in what you have. It's in the fear of losing, in the constant need to prove value, in the psychological dependency on something external to feel whole. Attachment steals exactly the freedom that seemed to be getting bought. It traps you at the point where you expected to break free. It was this contradiction that led Henry David Thoreau to ask a different question. At 27 years old, he went to live in a cabin near Walden Pond. He built his own house, grew part of his food, and lived with the minimum. Not out of economic necessity, but by choice. What he sought wasn't isolation or sacrifice, it was clarity. He wanted to understand what was truly necessary to live well. Thoreau wasn't running from society. He was asking a question few people allow themselves to ask. What do I really need? Not to survive, not to impress, not to prove anything to anyone, but to live well, with presence and tranquility. The experiment wasn't about rejecting the world, but about separating necessity from convention, understanding where the essential ends and excess begins. It's important to say this clearly. Thoreau had means. He wasn't fleeing from hunger or abandonment. He had education, support, and a network that made that choice possible. Romanticizing poverty is cruel. What he was testing wasn't physical resistance, but intention. He wanted to know if it was possible to live well with less, if freedom could exist without accumulation, if simplicity could be richer than excess. He wasn't isolated from the world. Walden wasn't another planet. It was a few miles from town. He received visitors, went to the village, maintained connections. The experiment wasn't about total solitude, but about creating enough distance to see better, simplifying to gain perspective. Thoreau never argued everyone should drop everything and head to the woods. What he did was personal, a philosophical experiment, not a universal model. He wanted to understand the relationship between desire and necessity, between having and being, between accumulating and living. And this investigation transformed how he understood wealth. What he realized was simple and profound at the same time. Many of the things we treat as essential are, in reality, conveniences. There's nothing wrong with them, but they're not necessary to live well. For Thoreau, living well had less to do with accumulating and more to do with clarity, presence, and internal freedom, with not being hostage to comfort, nor to the fear of losing it. The less he depended, the freer he felt. The less he needed to prove, the more whole he was. He didn't reject the world. He just redefined his relationship with it. He learned to be in the world without being devoured by it. He lived at Walden for 2 years. Then he returned to society, to common life. But he didn't return the same. He returned knowing what was important. He returned with less attachment, less urgency, less fear. He continued writing, thinking, influencing. He continued participating in the world, now with clarity, intention, and freedom. Many people question whether he could do that, whether there was privilege involved, whether the choice was fair, considering not everyone can simply step away from common life. And yes, he could. He had means. But that's not the central question. The more important question isn't whether he could live like that. It's what he decided not to need. Thoreau had access to comfort, stability, common life. He could have accumulated, but he chose to investigate something else, his relationship with desire. And that's not exclusive to those with money, that's human. You don't need to go to a cabin to ask yourself what you really need. You don't need to drop everything to distinguish the essential from the excess. That question can be asked where you are, with what you have. The issue isn't how much you possess, but how much you depend. Thoreau wasn't trying to prove moral superiority. He was trying to free himself from his own need, to test if he could live without the constant urgency society imposes. And he discovered he could. He discovered that freedom wasn't in having more, but in needing less. The focus was never privilege, it was consciousness. Anyone can become hostage to their own desire. Anyone can live in fear of losing. Anyone can enslave themselves to what they possess. The difference begins when this is noticed, and when you choose to act differently. When you have more, you usually want more. Not out of greed, but because the standard rises, expectation increases, fear grows, you have more to lose. And this changes everything, how you decide, what you accept, what you tolerate. More money doesn't mean more freedom. Often it means more prison. Prison to a lifestyle that needs to be maintained, to an image that needs to be sustained, to the constant fear of going backward. The comfort that promised relief ends up creating dependencies: financial, emotional, social. Over time, you get used to it. What was luxury becomes necessity. What was extra becomes basic. And then you can't live without it anymore. Attachment grows along with the bank account, and fear grows along with attachment. This isn't about social class. It's about human behavior, about how the mind adapts, creates dependencies, and transforms comfort into prison. Rich or poor, anyone can confuse having with being. Anyone can forget that freedom doesn't come from outside. And that's the paradox. You seek money to be free, but the more you have, the more you fear losing. And this fear traps more than lack does. It paralyzes, controls, prevents changes. You become hostage to what should liberate you. This is where an important counterpoint enters. There's a film called Into the Wild. It tells the true story of Chris McCandless, a recent graduate with a promising future and structured family, who decided to leave everything. He donated his savings, burned documents, cut ties, and went to live on the road. Without money, without plans, without connections. Chris grew up in an environment that, on the outside, seemed stable, but inside was marked by conflicts and appearances. He saw money functioning as anesthesia, as distraction, as a way to avoid what really mattered, and he rejected all of that. He didn't want comfort or security. He wanted authenticity. He wanted truth. He wanted to feel he was alive, not just functioning within a system that didn't make sense to him. But the freedom he sought was radical, extreme, a total rupture with everything that represented society. Chris traveled across the United States, living from temporary jobs and brief encounters. He met people, passed through different places, experienced a freedom that came from constant movement. At each stop, he left something behind, not from conscious detachment, but as part of a search that still had no name. The more he distanced himself from common structures, the more he believed he was approaching something essential. The final point of this journey was Alaska. There, he lived alone in an abandoned bus, isolated from any support. He hunted, gathered plants, read, wrote. He tried to sustain his own life without depending on anyone. For a time, he felt he'd found what he was looking for: silence, autonomy, absence of external expectations. But this isolation had a cost. He became ill after ingesting a toxic plant, lost strength, and couldn't get out of there. He died young, alone. Shortly before, he left something written, simple and devastating, that happiness is only real when it can be shared. Chris's story doesn't ask for blind admiration or easy judgment. It shows what happens when the search for freedom transforms into total rupture. Not because the desire for freedom was wrong, but because it was taken to a point where there was no more exchange, no presence, no return. The film doesn't propose a path to follow. It functions as a warning. It shows that breaking isn't the same as liberating yourself, that cutting everything isn't the same as letting go, that isolation isn't synonymous with autonomy. Chris had courage, conviction, and intensity. But the outcome makes clear that the extreme demands a high price. Neither absolute attachment nor total rejection produce a whole life. Freedom isn't born from the absence of the world, but from how you choose to be in it. An extraordinary life doesn't require disappearing. It doesn't require denying connections, comfort, or structure. It requires consciousness, clarity about what sustains and what suffocates, choices made from lucidity, not from escape. It's at this point that the contrast with Thoreau completes itself. He stepped away to understand and returned. He used distancing as a tool, not as a destination. He observed, adjusted, and reintegrated. He didn't break with life. He learned to inhabit it differently. Thoreau wrote, dialogued, influenced. He didn't isolate himself permanently. The retreat was a means, not an end. He took what he learned in the forest back to the world. He learned to be in society without being devoured by it. For Thoreau, simplicity wasn't poverty, it was consciousness. Knowing what he needed and what he could give up. having control over desires instead of being controlled by them, living lightly without accumulating out of fear or seeking security in things that can't truly protect. He didn't reject society, he redefined his relationship with it. He chose to participate without losing himself, to be present without enslaving himself, to have without depending. Integrated simplicity isn't about having less, it's about needing less. It's being well with what you have, and equally well with what you don't have. It's not tying your own peace to something external. It's being whole, regardless of circumstances. You don't need to choose between the world and yourself. It's possible to have both, to live well and be free, to achieve without losing yourself, to be in the race without being devoured by it. Balance isn't weakness, it's wisdom, it's maturity. It's the only way to remain whole. In Taoism, there's a concept called Wu Wei. It's usually translated as non-action, but that's misleading. Wu Wei isn't passivity. It's not crossing your arms and waiting. It's acting without forced effort. Acting from clarity, not desperation. Doing what needs to be done without internal war, without unnecessary tension. Laozi, the author of the Tao Te Ching, used water as an image. It doesn't force, doesn't fight, doesn't resist, and yet it crosses mountains. It shapes stone. It reaches where it needs to reach, not because it struggles, but because it flows. It follows the natural path, the one that requires less and delivers more. Wu Wei is acting this way, making decisions without urgency, working without tension, seeking without desperation, doing what makes sense at the right pace, without pushing what isn't ready yet. Trusting that not everything needs to be controlled to work. This isn't laziness. It's not giving up. It's intelligence. Forcing too much locks the process. Anxiety distorts vision. Fear of losing prevents gaining. Wu Wei is the opposite of attachment. Letting go to allow. Trusting to flow. You don't need to fight with life. You need to learn to accompany it. Participate without rigidity. Be present without tension. Act without grasping. Live without locking up. When you force, you block. The mind closes in fear, in urgency, in the need to guarantee. And without clarity, you decide poorly. You act to relieve anxiety, not to build something real. Effort moved by fear is inefficient. It spends energy, but doesn't generate progress. It keeps you busy, but doesn't move you forward. Because it's not born from a lucid plan. It's born from reaction, from the attempt to control what can't be controlled. Clarity comes from relaxation, not passive relaxation, but conscious relaxation. From the ability to think before acting, to wait for the right moment, to not grab everything now. The tense mind sees fewer possibilities. The relaxed mind sees paths that desperation hides. This isn't about doing nothing. It's about doing from the right place. Acting when it makes sense, not from fear. Building with clarity, not with urgency. Understanding that life isn't a race to arrive first, but a process that requires presence. Forcing less isn't giving up. It's stopping fighting where there's no fight. Saving energy for what matters. Acting with precision, not desperation. And this changes everything. The result, the quality of what you build, and how you feel along the way. Letting go doesn't push away wealth. It removes the desperation that distorts the path. You don't stop achieving, you just stop grasping. Grasping paralyzes. Building moves. Detachment doesn't destroy goals. It cleans vision. It allows you to focus on what's within your reach without wasting energy on what you don't control. It leaves you light to advance and centered to not lose yourself. When you let go, your decisions change place. They stop being born from fear and start being born from clarity. You stop choosing what seems safe but doesn't make sense. You stop accepting bad situations just to avoid risks. You stop clinging to what no longer serves you just because you invested too much time. Letting go doesn't weaken you. It returns a more lucid courage. The courage to choose what's right, even when it's uncomfortable. Letting go isn't giving up. It's reorganizing priorities. It's realizing you can want something without depending on it to exist, that you can seek without urgency, that you can lose without destroying yourself. And when you act from that place, everything improves. Your choices, your movements, what you build. Desperation does the opposite. It makes you accept less than you deserve, negotiate poorly, remain where you shouldn't. Say yes when you wanted to say no. Grasp what's worthless out of fear of not finding anything better. Desperation diminishes you, makes you forget your value. When you let go, this changes. You remember you don't need to beg, that you don't need to lower yourself, that you don't need to accept crumbs. You remember you can wait, refuse, choose. This isn't arrogance, it's dignity, it's self-respect. Letting go doesn't push away wealth. It pushes away what prevents you from building it. It removes the fear that paralyzes, the urgency that blinds, the desperation that makes you accept little. Letting go leaves you free to act with clarity and choose with consciousness. The logic is simple. Those who don't depend negotiate better. Those who don't fear losing risk more intelligently. Those who aren't trapped move with more speed. Detachment doesn't make you give up. It makes you stronger, more efficient, more free. And freedom creates. Freedom attracts. When you're light, you see opportunities desperation doesn't see. When you're not afraid, you build what fear would never allow. Wealth isn't what you have. It's what you don't need. It's the internal freedom of being well with what exists and with what doesn't exist. It's not depending on anything external to feel whole. Not living in fear of losing. Being present. Being light. You can have much and be poor. You can have little and be rich. Because wealth isn't measured in numbers, but in peace, clarity, and freedom. It's waking without fear, sleeping without weight, looking at what you have without feeling the lack of what you don't have, living without comparing yourself, existing without proving yourself. Comfort isn't the enemy. Dependency is. You can have stability, security, and still be free. The problem was never having, it was needing. And this doesn't let go all at once, but gradually, with consciousness. You don't need to drop everything to be free. You need to drop the fear, the urgency, the comparison, the constant need to prove value. This can start now, where you are, with what you have. Wealth is not being hostage. It's controlling your desires without being controlled by them. Wanting without desperation. Seeking without urgency. Achieving without losing yourself. Being here, whole, present. You're richer than you imagine. Not for what you possess, but for what you can let go. And when you let go, you discover you always had enough, that you were always free, that the wealth you sought outside was always within, waiting for you to stop running and notice. If this video made sense to you, subscribe to the channel and leave your like. And tell me in the comments, what are you trying to detach from right now? If you've made it this far, this kind of reflection is probably already part of your path. That's why I created the Philosophical Forge, a training program with 10 video lessons designed to help you apply the philosophy developed by great thinkers to your personal and professional life and build a mind that is wiser, more rational, and less ruled by emotions. Start 2026 by transforming your life and investing in what truly matters. You. Check the first pinned comment and get your 10% discount coupon. See you in the next video.